So hello everybody, thanks and a very warm welcome to you for joining us on this British Coffee Association webinar on recycling coffee, delivering solutions. Today we're in conversation with Rick Hindley of Podback and George May of Bio-Bean. And today we're going to explore how these two companies are helping to drive circularity through recycling coffee pods and coffee grounds. We've also got Paul Rook, our Executive Director, standing by just in case this internet connection goes down, because we've had a few problems this morning, but hopefully we won't need to go to Paul, the best role in the world, Paul. There will be time for questions at the end of the seminar, but you don't need to wait until the end. If you want to ask questions as we go, both Rick and George have agreed that they're happy to take your questions, so just please do feel free to ask them as we go. We're going to go to Rick first to talk about Podback. Rick is the Executive Director of Podback, and it's the nationwide coffee pod recycling service. It was started by some of the biggest names in the coffee industry. Rick, tell us how and why Podback came about.
So Podback, yeah, good morning everybody. And thank you for the invitation to be with you today to talk about Podback. So Podback, we're less than a year old. We had our formal launch in April last year. And we were formed by, as you say, the biggest names in the coffee pod sector. So that's Nestle, Nespresso and JDE. Now, all of those companies were running their own coffee pod recycling schemes. But there was a recognition that if we were really to aspire to, or they were to aspire to really maximize the recycling of pods, they needed to work together to develop a common solution which was accessible to all the coffee pod users in the UK. So the learnings were taken from the different schemes that the companies had run, and Podback was born out of that. And I think it's important to say that whilst Podback was set up by the founder members, we aspire to represent and involve all of the companies that are involved in the coffee pod sector, which is obviously a rapidly expanding sector.
And I guess, Rick, the popularity, the increasing popularity of pods and machines that mostly in people's homes did kind of create a bit of a problem insofar as they were almost a victim of their own success, insofar as really popular with people, but then obviously creating a lot of waste. And Podback is the solution to that. Absolutely.
I think over the last 2 years or so, during the various lockdowns we've had, there's no doubt that the coffee pods as a sector has benefited from that, with a rapid expansion of sales, etc. But I think it's true to say, and this definitely was something that came out of the work that was done by the founder members in preparation, that there was a real willingness amongst consumers to recycle, and they were actually looking for recycling programs. And so before Podback was launched, some YouGov research was done, and it was very clear from those findings that if there was a recycling scheme in place, that consumers would actually use it. So and that's been borne out in the schemes that we've launched already. So at the beginning, when Podback was launched last April-May time, we started curbside collections in South Derbyshire and in Cheltenham, and subsequently we've launched in 5 other areas. In all of the areas we've launched, we've been really really impressed and reassured by the take-up and the participation levels. So we're sort of in Cheltenham, which was one of the first ones, we're now sort of at 60%, 60+% of what our target was in terms of the number of people participating. And equally, the other collection option other than curbside, and perhaps we'll talk a bit more about the collections options in a minute, is our Collect Plus system. And month on month, we're seeing increases in the number of people that are engaging and registering for that program. So what is clear, that there's a real interest from pod users to recycle. They enjoy the coffee in the pod, clearly, and to provide a recycling solution is also something that's important to many of them. So yeah, we're really encouraged by the participation rates.
And what's your target then? You said you're at 60% of your target. What target did you have?
Well, so we'll say target. So obviously, when you go to a local authority area, not every household has a coffee pod machine. So we take a view as to the number of households in a particular area will have a coffee pod machine, and the number of people who use those pods regularly or use those machines regularly. And so we set ourselves a target based on the number of those people who potentially have a pod machine participating. And so it's difficult to say because it does vary, but suffice to say that we're aiming at getting recycling rates which are sort of compatible with the recycling rates that you achieve in traditional packaging type materials.
So how does it work? How does the collection work then? What is Podback?
Right, yeah, I think let's talk you through it, because it is straightforward. So the first port of call for a coffee pod user who wants to use the scheme is to go to the Podback website, put in their postcode, and it will tell them whether there's an existing curbside collection in their area. And there's 7 local authorities that are currently collecting pods at curbside. And if they're in a local authority area that covers curbside, they register on the website and we send them a roll of bags. Well, firstly, they have to tell us what brand they're using, because clearly we're only providing this service to our members' brands. So they tell us that, and if they're using a member brand, they're invited to sign up for the scheme. They tell us what brand they're using, so we can determine whether they've got plastic pods or aluminium pods, and then we send them a bag, a coloured bag, which is either for aluminium or plastic. So we send them that bag, and they simply then put that bag out on the day that the local authority are doing their collections. It's as easy as that if you're in a curbside collection area. Now, clearly, the majority of coffee pod users today aren't in an area which is covered by curbside, and what we wanted to do from day one is to make Podback accessible wherever you are in the UK. So if your postcode isn't covered, it tells you it's not covered currently, but we're striving to encourage as many local authorities as possible to collect. But it directs you then to your brand's website to get a bag that you can then use to take the pods to one of close to 7,000 Collect Plus shops across the country. And you download a Collect Plus label from the Collect Plus website, put it on the bag, and simply drop it off at a Collect Plus site. So very easy and convenient. But for the Collect Plus part, it's getting those bags out there is obviously the challenge, to make it as easy as possible. And already we have Ocado, so if you buy your pods through Ocado, you can request a bag as part of your order. And again, as I say, if you're buying your pods through some of our members, their own websites provide bags free of charge. But just 2 weeks ago, we were really excited to be able to announce that Morrison's are the first high street grocery retailer where you can now get your Podback bags when you're buying your pods in store. So very simple. We aspire to provide curbside collections to at least half of the UK households within 5 years. And so we've got a very active programme of engagement with local authorities, because we recognise that for this to work, it needs to be easy as convenient as possible.
Mm-hmm. And what happens then so that's the sort of collection part of it, whether you're putting them out with your curbside recycling or whether you're putting them back in the bag and taking it to a Collect Plus store. What happens to the pods then? Where do they go?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and something that we're really keen to talk about, because we're really transparent about what happens to the pods. We've all seen a lot in the media in the last few years questioning about whether things are really recycled. Do we export them to other countries where it becomes a problem in other countries? And one of our key cornerstones of Podback from the very beginning was that we wanted to be very clear about where the pods are recycled and what happens to them. And most importantly, it happens here in the UK. So as we've already said, there are 2 types of pods. There are plastic and there are aluminium pods. The plastic pods go to a company, well, first of all, they go to a company called Allen's Way in Yorkshire, who shred the pods, recover the coffee, and the coffee currently from their site goes to an AD plant literally a mile up the road, an anaerobic digestion plant where the coffee is turned into energy and then ultimately soil improver. And then the plastic that's recovered as part of that process goes to a company called Bright Green, who are in Castleford, so again not far up the road, so in terms of transport distances, very, very short. And currently, though, they're turning those pods into a variety of plastic products. So from garden furniture to washing up bowls to like gutters on your house. So a variety of different products. Now the aluminium goes to a different reprocessor, and that's a company called Tandem in Congleton in Cheshire, and they've invested heavily in the process there, and so they actually recover the coffee on site there from the aluminium pods, and again going to anaerobic digestion, and they remelt the aluminium on site there in Congleton and to form ingots, which go to predominantly actually to make beverage cans. So the aluminium that's recovered from the pods is going to make drinks cans. So two slightly different processes, obviously for different materials, but in their own way are fulfilling sort of the circular requirements of the aluminium and the plastic. And interestingly, we're just about to produce some films which demonstrate the process, because as I've said at the beginning, we want to provide reassurance not just to our partners, our members, but also retailers, and also most importantly consumers, that this really is happening, is really valuable, and it really does make a difference. So the real way to do that is to demonstrate it.
Yeah, and you talk about your members. How many members do you have? Who are they, and what's your target for that? How does the sort of membership aspect of it work?
So as I said at the beginning, Podback is open to any brands or retailers who are involved in placing pods onto the market. Our founder members, Jacobs Douwe Egberts, JDE, Nespresso and Nestle. Crew Cafe were our first independent coffee brand to come on board, and just before Christmas we announced 4 or 5 more independent brands that came on board, who are sort of smaller players in the field. Our first retail partner, suppose, came on board, Morrison's, a couple of weeks ago, and we are in pretty advanced discussions with another 4 more independent coffee brands who hopefully we will be announcing in the next couple of weeks, and some big announcements coming on very shortly with big names also joining. So we're less than a year old, made good progress, and what we're seeing now is that when you bring on not just additional local authorities, that opens the discussions with more local authorities. So we've got local authorities coming to us now, whereas before now we were having to go knocking on doors. But equally, from a membership point of view, every week we're getting new inquiries from new companies wanting to join and get involved. And that's really important, because for this to work, it really does need to be a collaborative industry approach with one scheme which is simple and easy for people to use. Yeah, very encouraging so far. Lots more to do. Great if we could get some more retailers on board to make it even more convenient for consumers to engage.
And of course, we were talking about household recycling of pods, but it's not just households that have pod machines, is it? We've got businesses and offices and hotels. And how does that aspect of it work? Yeah,
again, spot on. So we've, and obviously very early days, Podback is a startup, and we've been very much focused since the startup on household recycling, and we will continue to be so, to be our primary focus. But we're also very aware that pods are increasingly used in commercial premises, whether it be hotels, offices, or restaurants. It's true to say that over the past 2 years, because a lot of these places have been shut, we've not spent too much time looking at it. But right now we're starting to look at this and to develop a solution for a B2B solution effectively. And again, we aspire to provide a solution that covers the whole of the UK. And so we're in talks with 2 or 3 different organisations about that and what that might look like. And so we hope to be launching a B2B service as well across the UK later this year. So providing recycling services both for householders and businesses, hopefully by the end of the year.
Great.
And again, it will fit very much in the same model, that we'll use the same reprocessors, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's really important to really add to this is that certainly on the household side, all of the costs that are incurred in collecting pods by local authorities are picked up by Podback and ultimately its members. So it is true extended producer responsibility, if you like. And this is something that we're really keen to emphasize, that this isn't us pushing the costs of collection of pods onto local authorities. This is our members picking up the cost, picking up their responsibility and doing it willingly. And it is a genuine commitment to maximize the number of pods that are recycled.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of the coffee industry providing solutions to challenges and problems. And like you say, extended producer responsibility is something that's coming in anyway. But again, this is somewhere where the coffee industry is already on the front foot, if you like, and sort of being proactive about that problem. When it comes to, there's quite a bit of advertising around compostable pods. Some brands are producing those. What kind of challenges do you think that poses for Podback?
So compostable pods are out there. I mean, Podback is very much focused on aluminium and plastic pods because it's a recycling scheme, which is obviously different to the route taken for compostable pods. And I mean, we're not about selling aluminium or plastic or compostable pods. We're about providing a recycling solution. And I think there's probably room for all. But I think what's really important is that the messaging to consumers is really clear, so we don't get confusion. So what we don't want is compostable pods mixed with plastic pods or aluminium pods, because it does cause us problems in the recycling process. And that's the same not just in the coffee pod sector, but it's the same particularly in the plastic sector, where compostables are being used for other plastic products. The risk is that they do contaminate and mean that a batch of plastics is not recyclable. So great, we're not going to get involved in the debate about whether plastic is better, aluminium is better, or compostable pods are better. But what we will advocate and support is very clear messaging that the systems that are created for these different systems do actually make it clear to consumers what to do, and it doesn't cause us problems or even the compostable pods problems further down the line. And
I see you've just had
render them unrecyclable.
I see you've just had a drinks delivery there. Will George and I get that too?
It comes from a pod.
Naturally. So you mentioned about sort of contamination or potential cross-contamination there. I think that's something that in Europe they're having a bit of some issues with in terms of their recycling streams. And I know that the European Coffee Federation is trying to check with its members what they're doing in various European member states to see how they collect, sort, recycle coffee pods as well. Is there an opportunity to push Podback there as a more sensible, cohesive and aligned approach?
Yeah, I think that there are all eyes on Podback, if you like, because it is a different approach. There are different approaches for pod collection in different countries in Europe. But I think what I'm seeing, and I'm new to this sector, obviously, but what I'm seeing is a clear interest from certainly our founder members in looking at different solutions and learning. We've all got a lot to learn, and sharing experiences is really an important part of that. On contamination itself, interestingly, we have no problems with contamination at all. So the pods that we're collecting, both through the curbside and Collect Plus, we're seeing more or less zero contamination. And I think a big part of that is about communication, about clear communication. But again, it's also about making it convenient. And so there is a lot to learn. Clearly, different countries will need potentially different solutions, and Podback could be a solution that could be rolled out in other countries. I mean, we're already looking at Ireland because there are obviously synergies between the UK collection systems for waste and recycling with Ireland, and so so we're starting to look at possibly providing a Podback solution to Ireland as well. But it does depend a little bit on the waste collection systems that are in place for for packaging items in these countries. But we're very keen to share our experience in the UK, very open. But we also have to remember it's very early days for us as well. Less than a year old. We've learned a lot, learning a lot, changing the way we do things slightly. Yeah, we've got lessons which we're very happy to share.
Great, thanks very much for that, Rick. I'm just going to ask you one more question before we move on to George. I'm conscious that we've not heard from George yet, and we've got a few questions coming in actually. And although I said at the beginning that we would ask them at the time, I think we'll wait till later on so that we can hear from George and Bio-Bean as well. But just lastly, to Rick, what's the sort of ultimate vision then for Podback? What's the big goal?
Our mission is to ensure that every coffee pod that's enjoyed is recycled. It's not for Podback and Podback's members. It's not about sort of playing lip service to it and providing a scheme just to show that we're doing something. This is a genuine program supported by our members with a commitment to maximise the number of pods that we recycle. And I suppose one milestone that we have, which is a really important milestone for us, is that as well as making coffee pod recycling accessible to everybody across the UK from day one through curbside, but mainly through Collect Plus at the moment, within 5 years we want to be providing curbside collections in partnership with local authorities to at least half of the UK households, which is a big ambition. And an ambition that we can only achieve with the support of the whole sector and also with local authorities. But we're very focused on making pod recycling as convenient as possible. So that's has to be with local authorities. And so, yeah, that's my personal #1 ambition, is to hit that half of UK households within 5 years. And if we do that, I think we're well on the road to what we're trying to achieve. But this has to just reiterate, this is a sector-wide program, so we would urge anybody who's involved in coffee pods to get in touch and to work with us, because that's the only way it's going to work. They are the people that can communicate to their customers.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much for that, Rick. Rick Hindley, the Executive Director of Podback, and you're going to stay around, obviously, till the end to take some more questions as well. But now we're going to have a chat to George May, who's Managing Director of Bio-Bean, the world's largest recycler of coffee grounds. So where Podback's predominantly household coffee waste, Bio-Bean's on an industrial scale, George, isn't it? Tell us a bit about it. How did Bio-Bean come about?
Yeah, hi, thank you. So we are so a slightly different approach to the approach that Podback has taken. So we focus on entirely non-consumer spent coffee grounds. So we're looking at coffee that comes from the high street, from the instant coffee manufacturers, airports, that kind of thing. So as you say, we're the largest recycler of spent coffee grounds in the world, which is, you know, a pretty niche market to have dominated. But we think we've done that. We're not a waste management company. We don't collect the coffee ourselves, so we partner with existing logistics infrastructure to get hold of that coffee. So whether that's with waste management companies like First Mile or Paper Round in sort of the large urban areas, so typically sort of London, Birmingham, Manchester, where you've got large density of population and the ease of collection and volumes, or with the likes of Costa Coffee, who we've worked with for 6+ years now. They actually backhaul the coffee themselves on their own infrastructure that goes back to their central depots, and we then collect it from there once it's been aggregated. So it is a different model. We're looking to, like I say, collect spent coffee from, whether it's the Costas, the independent chains, Stansted airports, Birmingham universities, that, you know, all the way up to the Nestle instant coffee plant up in Derbyshire, and we then bring that to our site, to our network of sort of logistics providers.
So again, this is kind of the coffee industry looking into a solution to solve the problem of what to do with all that waste. How much waste? Is it 250,000 tonnes or thereabouts waste coffee?
It's very
I've
hard
got that from your website.
no one's ever done a sort of deal study, but to take the BCA stats, I think we're up to nearly 100,000 cups of coffee drunk every day in the UK. I think it's about 98 million every day, which, if you work it through, is somewhere between about 250,000 tonnes to, you know, potentially upwards of 500,000 tonnes of spent coffee produced in the UK. Now, you know, that's across pods, instant, you know, across the whole piece. So, you know, there's a huge amount of material out there that is, you know, as I suppose Podback and Bio-Bean are both demonstrating, is being, you know, undervalorized or just wasted. You know, it's a raw material that sort of sits under our noses. So that's what we've set out to you know, to deal with. That's the challenge in front of us, right? There's a huge opportunity to reduce the carbon footprint associated with spent coffee grounds, to, you know, reduce the need for virgin and fossil raw materials that you know, Bio-Bean products can replace, and ultimately drive sort of sustainable change, get people thinking differently about waste materials. You know, look in front of them and see how can we address the, you know, the undoubted environmental, you know, sort of crisis that we have in front of us. Well, what are the really easy things that we can start to do that are under our noses?
So what, how much or what sort of percentage of that waste is Bio-Bean currently recycling then?
I mean, not a huge percentage. So we have a capacity of about 16,000 tonnes of wet spent coffee grounds coming into us. So it's a significant volume as a single waste stream being processed on one site. We're not quite at capacity yet, but we should be over the next 12 months or so. And then we have plans that we can expand our capacity, our drying capacity predominantly, should we need to. So yeah, we're always on the lookout for more partners to bring on board. Like I say, we work with an awful lot of the high street chains. There's 2 more who are in the process of onboarding themselves with us, and you know, that's hugely exciting for us because it takes a long time to get some of these, you know, these major global businesses to sort of, you know, move. But yeah, so about 16,000 tonnes is our capacity at the moment.
Okay, and how does that work then? So it comes to you in what, trucks or?
So we're receiving sort of
wet grounds.
Yeah, wet ground. So we receive it in sort of basically in skips, in large skips, so 30 cubic yard containers that get tipped out. So we're based on the old RAF base at Alconbury in Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire, and we have 2 of the old U2 spy plane hangars. One is our sort of receiving hangar, and one is our production hangar. So we receive all of the wet grounds into one of the hangars. We then have to decontaminate them. So typically, if they're coming out of a, you know, coffee shop or wherever it might be, obviously they're collected in a plastic bag. So we put them through a process to remove the plastics, take out any contaminants, of which there aren't very many, but things like milk bottle tops or wooden stirrers, the odd, you know, sandwich or banana, that kind of thing. And we then dry the coffee down. So it's typically sort of 60% moisture when it comes to us, and we get it down to somewhere around sort of 8 to 10%, so that we can then process it into our end products. So we have a big biomass boiler on site that provides the heat for our drying process. And then from there, we're able to turn it into the products that we're producing today.
Which are?
Sorry, I keep going. I thought you might, you know, I'll let you tee it up for me. So the primary focus of the business at the moment are our biomass fuel products. So we produce a biomass pellet that goes into large greenhouses. So people growing sort of cucumbers, tomatoes, and things like that in the UK, where they need consistent heat, and have moved away from gas or oil-fired boilers in the past. The major sort of revenue stream for the business is the strategically placed product over my left shoulder, so our coffee logs, which are a domestic heating fuel for wood burners and multi-fuel stoves. They're just effectively a compressed briquette. Coffee is a really fantastic fuel. It's very, very highly calorific, so the heat output from coffee is about 20% higher than wood. So you get a really powerful, efficient, hot burning fire from coffee logs, and they are available in all good retailers, supermarkets, DIY stores, garden centres. Obviously, we're coming to the back end of winter now, but yeah, so that's the main part of the sort of business at the moment. And then for us, the more exciting piece, and the way the business was set up, was we wanted to get hold of a lot of coffee. We wanted to prove that you could recycle coffee at an industrial scale. The biomass products allow us to make sure that we'd always have an output for the grounds that we're processing, and now we've started to add on the more valuable sort of products off the back of that. The sort of the most exciting for us is what we call infocaf, so it's a bulk raw material. So once the coffee's been dried down, screened, sieved, passed through magnets, etc., to remove any contaminants that might be there, we're left with varying grades of a raw material that we're supplying into the plastics industry, the bioplastics industry as a filler. We're supplying into the packaging industry, so whether that's into card, papers, corrugate. We're supplying to the cosmetics industry. We're supplying some slightly more left field ones, like the automotive friction industry for brake pads, foundry manufacturers, And in each case, they're looking for materials that offer true circularity, sustainability, reduction in carbon footprint, quite possibly, shortening of supply chains, so that materials aren't crossing over the world, and there are technical sort of benefits as well to the material depending on what it's going into, and it's a really interesting area for us, because I think even in the last 18 months, whereas sustainability has been on people's radar for a while, I would say that in the last 18 months it's become even more of a must-have. We have got people approaching and say, how do we incorporate this into our products? What can we do with it? Now, whether that's industrial applications or whether that's big brands saying, if you're going to process our coffee grounds, what can we be doing to show the circularity of those? So we're producing things like cups, in partnership with the guys at Short Walk or Circular and Co now, that's a 30% Infocaf polymer in there. We're going into the new McDonald's net zero restaurant has included our material in their wall art. We're talking to people about express machines, the bean to cut machines that are out there. We're looking at a whole range of different things. This is countertops, recycling units, things that not wanting to turn an entire store into being made of coffee, but start to show real circular applications that reduce the need for MDF or chipboard that will disintegrate over a short period of time and need replacing, and actually doesn't have that level of brand engagement, consumer engagement, and again from that high level about trying to educate people about thinking about waste differently. So there's some really exciting opportunities, I think, there.
So really, from the waste coffee grounds, you can create almost anything then.
Yeah,
Fuel sources and.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And so we're working with plastics compounders who are the experts in how to incorporate this material. We're working with cosmetics manufacturers who again are the experts. So we're not trying to be all things to all people, but what Bio-Bean is capable of processing industrial quantities of spent coffee into a consistent bulk raw material that has a huge versatility and range of applications, all of which displace existing state of the art in terms of fossil-based, synthetic, petrochemical derived raw materials that are far more carbon heavy, and don't offer that circularity, that sustainability that people absolutely have to have, whether it's a consumer or sort of industry driven demand.
So what happened to all that waste then? We talked just the question before this about where your grounds come from, and you said from airports and high street retail coffee chains. What happened to that waste before Bio-Bean?
So probably going to a few different places. So some of it would have ended up in landfill, probably, ended up in the general waste, the sort of black bin bag waste. Some of it would have ended up in composting. Some of it might have ended up in incineration, some into anaerobic digestion. So kind of a whole range of places, all of which cost businesses money. Bio-Bean operates on a zero gate fee basis. We're looking to obtain a raw material. Our business model is based on what we can manufacture from that, not what we can charge to receive a raw material. So there's a cost benefit and the carbon benefit to what we do. Now, I might say the wrong thing to Rick, but we've had a life cycle analysis done that shows that our process is the most beneficial route for coffee over and above incineration, anaerobic digestion, composting. So, we believe we have the best solution for coffee. I should say we're talking to Rick and the team at Podback about how we might be able to work together going forward. So it's not as though we're kind of coming at this from opposite sides. There's an opportunity to collaborate there, and obviously with the Infocaf material, some of the big brands, there's opportunities to partner with them on the material side of the back end. So there is a whole collaborative piece there. But yeah, so previously the grounds would have gone somewhere else to a range of different end applications, all of which have a higher carbon footprint and a higher cost.
And then you have become you're saying there about being the best sort of the best way to deal with coffee. You're a certified B Corporation. What does that mean, and how do you achieve that certification? So
B Corporations are, to coin the phrase, it's effectively a group of businesses, a growing group of businesses. I think there are about 5,000 globally, so 500 or so in the UK, who are using business as a force for good is the phrase that they use. It's effectively a standpoint or way of operating as a business whereby you don't just operate purely for profits, but people, planet and profits are given equal weighting. you have to make a legal change to your articles of association, your governing documents, to say that you will consider more than, that you have that broader view, that sort of triple bottom line idea. And really, like I say, it's a way of operating that looks to incorporate the greater good into an operating model. So the B Corp sort of assessment is, I think, 200 questions or thereabouts, that covers governance, environment, workers, supply chain, community, and all of the ways that you interact with them. It takes a long time. It's detailed. You then go through 2 levels of verification, and if you achieve a score over, I think, 80 points out of 200, with the average being 50, then you certify as a B Corporation, and you have to go through then annual recertification, and so on. So it's a thorough process, and I think really just a public marker of the kind of business that we want to be, the way that we want to operate, the people we want to operate with, how we will treat our staff, our colleagues, but obviously also for us, the key thing here is, the environment for us. That's that this company is founded around, sort of sustainability being of everything we do.
Absolutely. And in terms then of, I guess, same question I put to Rick with regards to Podback, what about geographical expansion then? You mentioned that you're almost at capacity where you are in Cambridgeshire, and that you might be able to expand more here in the UK, but what about, is this a model that could and should work worldwide?
It should do, yes. So, I mean, we're actively looking at opportunities in sort of Western Europe. So that sort of Benelux region, where again, you've got a large concentration of population, large number of instant coffee manufacturers. So exactly, we believe that our model is replicable outside of the UK as well. And, we've got sort of half an eye on areas in the US that we know, again, could be potentially suitable. And, you could go east and look at sort of, Malaysia and those areas where, again, there's a lot of coffee manufacturing goes on. So absolutely, for us, it's about, sort of nailing the UK, getting the business, capacity here, and then driving scale and developing outside of the UK.
And would it work with producer countries, or I suppose that's more of the raw product as opposed to the beginning of it, as opposed to the end of the life cycle?
It is depending on where you are. It is, so like, if you go further east, so sort of the Malaysia and around there, obviously they're a producer, but they also have a lot of instant coffee plants there as well. So there's large volumes of spent grounds there. But you're right, typically it's more the sort of the processing end than the producing end, if that makes sense.
And do you think then, with what Bio-Bean is doing, all these different things that you're able to extract from coffee waste, is it more about now sort of using the whole bean, if you like, in the way that maybe farmers or chefs talk about using, the whole of an animal to get the best out of it, and to really, if you're using something, Rick's laughing, but just really, because I think beforehand it would be sort of the coffee was extracted and that was it, but actually, as companies like yourselves have found, and scientists have found, that there are other byproducts of coffee other than just the drink.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and we've looked at other things that we can do. There are oils in coffee that you can extract, and other things that are possible, but require significant scale really before it becomes economically viable. But I think absolutely, why wouldn't you use a material that's right under our noses, that's been being thrown away, that take the fuels, for example. The majority of packaged fuel in the UK is either fossil, and so dug out of the ground and has a huge carbon footprint, or imported. So we're relying on Latvian, Estonian, maybe Belarusian forestry to provide our wood, or potentially the States, but to a lesser extent for the domestic market. All of the things that are going on in the world at the moment mean that may be more challenging in the future. We've got gas prices, electricity prices going up. It's going to become more expensive to heat people's homes. All of those things that mean that actually looking for material applications that can, displace the need, reduce the reliance on raw, virgin, fossil materials is absolutely the right thing to do, be it coffee or anything else. So I think, like you say, that using the kind of the whole bean is really important.
Rick was laughing at my chef analogy, but that's fine. And just sort of lastly, we're talking specifically about coffee here, and Bio-Bean deals specifically in coffee. Is there a potential to work with other plants, crops, materials?
It's been suggested. We will stick with coffee for the time being. If there's enough of it and it's enough of a challenge to have mastered that. We've had, over the years, we've had people approach with chicken feathers, which have a high oil content in them, but obviously, just nightmare to handle. The sort of gloop that comes out of sweet factories, again, highly calorific. So we've had, eggshells suggested to us, tea leaves, but we're just going to stick to coffee for the moment.
For now. Okay. One thing I've been down to know as well is, do the coffee logs smell great when you put them in a wood burner?
It's so subjective. Some people are desperate for them to smell of coffee, and others hope they don't. There is definitely a coffee aroma to them. They come from the spent ground, so a lot of the volatiles have obviously landed in your cup rather than anything else. But there is definitely a coffee smell there. Once they're in your stove, hopefully your stove's nice and efficient and isn't leaking smoke out into the room. But so you won't really smell them once they're in your stove. But there is definitely an aroma from the bag.
I would like that. Even people who don't drink coffee like the smell of it. Surely, I'm going to buy some and test that out. Just lastly, then, for the questions, and we've got a few coming in, but from me, just to wrap up from Bio-Bean's perspective, George, what's the kind of ultimate vision and the goal and the mission for you?
Well, look, we want to process as much of the spent coffee grounds in the UK and beyond that we can get our hands on. We are set up to create scale, to create impact at scale that lasts. That is what we want to do. Be that through sort of behavior change, be that through the products that we produce. It's a high level and a sort of a practical level of what we're trying to achieve. And we believe we've got a scalable business model. We want to engage people with what we're doing. We want to work with big businesses. We believe we can help them. It's it's mutually beneficial ultimately. And the business is passionate about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what sits above everything else. And we've got this ubiquitous material that all of us handle day to day, and we're not using it in the way that we should be. So we want to try and correct that ultimately.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your time, George May, Managing Director of Bio-Bean, and Rick Hindley, Executive Director of Podback. We've got quite a few questions coming in now, if you don't mind answering some of those. We'll go back. There was one that I think I'll put to you, Rick, and it's from Ivan, and he says, who pays for the recycling of aluminium capsules? And what's the cost?
But all of the costs that are incurred in the collection of pods, so that whether that's the costs incurred by local authorities or the costs that we incur from shipping the pods from the local authorities to the recycling centre, or indeed any of the costs that are incurred in the recycling process, whether it be for aluminium or plastic, are covered by Podback. So ultimately our members fees are based on those costs. So so it's ultimately the companies that are putting pods onto the market are members who bear those costs.
Okay, I've got another one here as well, and it's about the plastic packaging tax, which of course comes into force on the 1st of April. And the question is, does plastic coffee pay? I guess the question is, would the plastic pods be paid through the plastic tax?
So my understanding on this is that plastic pods sit outside the plastic tax, so aren't part of it.
Okay, I've got a question that I can put to you, George. We hear that coffee has a role to play to produce energy and is quite powerful. Do you think, as aluminium has, that used coffee has a monetary value?
Someone would like us to pay for their coffee. Potentially, if it's commoditized at the moment, I don't believe it does. Currently it's a cost to businesses to dispose of, and you could apply that principle to any waste stream out there. Anything that is being incinerated has a calorific value and therefore has an energy value that can be derived from it. So, but people pay to put things into incineration at the moment. So, I don't believe there is a value from it, other than that we can save businesses money by not having to pay to dispose of it, and instead they can, deliver it to us for zero. So there's a financial benefit already before someone starts coming asking for money, money in the first place.
Okay, thanks. Tracy is asking for Rick, out of the millions of aluminium capsules on the market, what's the current estimated capture rate in comparison to plastic capsules? Is there a big difference?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's almost impossible to answer right now. Podback is less than a year old, so to actually give a recycling rate right now is probably not appropriate. But what I can say is that from the work that we're doing with the local authorities currently, the recovery levels are pretty similar for plastic and aluminium in terms of what we're getting back. And we are seeing sort of on the Collect Plus side, certainly from early this year when bags became more available, a similar increases in terms of the number of plastic pod users and aluminium pod users who are signing up to the scheme and using it. So yeah, I can't give specific numbers right now, but what I can say is that from what we can see, it bodes really well, and it's all about making it as convenient as possible. And to be honest, I don't see any reason why a plastic the numbers wouldn't be comparable in terms of participation rates between aluminium and plastic. I mean, what you can say is that thanks to actually work done by Nespresso in the past, there is probably more awareness of the recyclability of plastic, of aluminium pods compared to plastic. But we're seeing that changing, obviously, with the work that Podback are doing, because we're focused on both aluminium and plastic, and the messaging is exactly the same. So the awareness levels over time should equal out.
Okay, thanks for that, Rick. We've got another question about Podback, and it's how is it controlled which capsules brands are disposed into Podback bags? So
clearly, Podback is offering a recycling service to its members' brands, and so we are trying to minimise the number of free riders, if you like. And so when you go onto the Podback website, it will actually ask you which brand you're using, and if you're not using one of our member brands, it won't allow you to access the scheme. So obviously, when you get to the household level, it's almost impossible to police, and we certainly don't reject a load of pods because it's got non-member brand in it. But this is why I think it's so important that this is seen as an industry scheme. We would dearly love to be able to say to consumers, doesn't matter what brand you're using, you can recycle those pods. But in order for that to happen, it needs everybody in the industry who's putting pods on the market to become part of Podback. And then it's not an issue, and it becomes simpler for consumers. But ultimately, it's only fair that everybody who's in part of this picks up the cost of doing it. And so to offer a recycling service for pods that aren't part of our members scheme is basically supporting free riding, which goes against any EPR, extended producer responsibility scheme. We all have a responsibility, we all need to front up to it, and we all need to contribute to the cost of providing that service to consumers.
And it's handy that tomorrow is Global Recycling Day, almost as if we planned this. What would you like to see happen? What would your message be to brands, Rick and George? I mean, how do you both go about getting Rick, in Podback's case, members on board, and George, in your case, partners, getting them involved? What's the process there? Rick first.
So I start from Podback. So it's really interesting. So what we've seen really over the last 3 or 4 months is a lot of interest from brands that are coming to us, having seen what we've been doing and the success of the scheme. And I think it is a journey, isn't it? You need to have some sort of credibility in what you're doing. And as the scheme expands, others become interested, and I think this is quite interesting and serious. So we have a mix, if you like. So obviously we're responding and talking to brands that come to us. And we've got a lot of discussions going on with some big names as well, so high street names. So it's a bit of everything, really. It's to talk to them, explain what Podback's all about, explain that we're a non-competitive organisation, so our members won't use Podback to gain competitive advantage over anybody else. This is truly an industry scheme. And ultimately, it's all about cost. So it's being very transparent with those companies that we're talking to about how their membership fees are spent, and they are spent wholly on boosting coffee pod collection, because we are a not-for-profit company. That's really important to us. And the other thing is that you pay according to where you sit in the market. So our fees are based on market share. So they report totally in confidence the number of pods they sell, and then the costs are allocated on that basis. So very transparent. We'll tell them exactly what area of our operation that money is going to, and so it gives total reassurance. So transparency is at the core of Podback, whether it be transparency about where the pods are recycled, or how we're spending the money within the constraints, obviously, of competition law as well. So,
yeah. Okay, great, thanks. And same to you as well, George, with how it works at Bio.
It's probably quite similar in some ways. We're a little bit older than Podback, but again, that credibility piece. When we started, it was here's an idea. We needed to build some credibility. We were fortunate that Costa sort of came on board with us very early on, and one provided a large volume of coffee, but two kind of gave us credibility that if we're good enough, as it were, for Costa, then hopefully others would follow suit. So we have people approaching us, and we also go out and try and speak to the major high street chains, restaurants, coffee shops, because ultimately we want to attract volume. It's very difficult for us to sort of get 10 kilos from North Wales on a weekly basis. What we need to try and do is make sure that we're working with all of the major brands, so that where they have the logistics to back all those volumes, and they've got that infrastructure, that we can harness it and tap into it. So it is a remarkably similar approach to what Podback are doing, just slightly different, sort of two sides of the same coin almost.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much for that, and thank you very much for taking the questions. We've got one last one here before we wrap up today, and it's: what are the current alternatives for collecting compostable coffee capsules, home compostable and industrial compostable in the UK?
I'm certainly not a specialist on this, but what I do understand is that it's not possible. So where your local authority offers a food waste service, I understand that it's not possible to put your compostable pods into that facility. So I think it's a bit of a grey area. Clearly, if you're home composting, that provides a solution, but really, as I understand it, it's less than 6% of UK households, for example, have a home composting solution. So I'm definitely not the expert on this, and probably can't give a definitive answer. But I think again, it all goes back to messaging, doesn't it? So if there is a solution, it needs to be communicated. It needs to be communicated clearly.
In my naivety, I assumed that compostable capsules wouldn't be required to be collected anyway. I don't know. You would just put them in your home compost, maybe. But that's us just nearly at time, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to Rick and to George from Podback and Bio-Bean, respectively. And I think that's two great examples of companies that really are driving circularity. And thanks very much for your time today, and to everybody who's joined the webinar. I hope you found it interesting. And of course, you can get in touch with Rick and George, or with the companies. You can Google them online, or you can find details from ourselves at the British Coffee Association as well. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined today, and enjoy the rest of your day, and have a good weekend when it comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.